Bien, bien, para mí ya está la cena, ¿no? Pues muchas gracias, Alex, que ya han hecho toda mi ponencia, como toda mi introducción. Bueno, ahora voy a empezar en inglés. So I'm going to change now because I thought, well, I'll do my first talk in English, and next year for my big goal, I'm going to do it in Spanish. Gracias, gracias. So let me start a little bit about who I am. Well, if you may be able to tell from my accent, I'm from Los Angeles, California, but as Alex mentioned, I've been spending the last 10 years working and living in various countries in Europe, from Germany to the Netherlands and most recently Spain. Also, a little bit of context about me. I think I consider myself as much as a product lead as well as a tech lead. So and I have quite I think a diverse background. So I'm not your traditional CTO. I think I haven't spent this past 20 years studying engineering. I know there's a lot of amazing engineers in this room today, but my background is actually more from the product side. I've also been a UX designer as well, and most recently have also become a software developer. And I've studied for my master's in education, technology, innovation, and education, looking at the design of various technologies in the application of learning. So I'm very excited about early stage startups, as well as the sector of education technology. I am currently the CTO of Swipe Guide. Swipe Guide is a B2B SaaS application. We develop a how-to platform for frontline workers. Those are people working in manufacturing companies to help them create and manage instructions for training, for checklists, for safety, and all sorts of different procedures. We help digitize those instructions or guides in an app. I don't have my phone here, but if I did, I could swipe it. Therefore, it's called Swipe Guide. We are in more than 90 countries with our headquarters in Amsterdam and the US. And our major customers include Heineken, PepsiCo, and ABB. Today, I want to tell you what Swipe Guide looked like when I first joined as a software developer over 4 years ago. I saw a lot of waste in the product development process, and I thought, how could we improve this? First, oh, that's quite blurry. I discovered that we would have, whenever we wanted to start a project, there was a list of requirements somewhere hidden in an Excel spreadsheet that no one really understood and was really long. Does this look familiar to anyone here? Some? Yeah? Okay, good. I was afraid of that. I was like, everyone has this figured out, and I can go home now. Okay, but that's great. And of course, there were a lot of requirements, and we would have all these ways to prioritize them. We would use RICE method. We would use the Moscow method. And then we would take these requirements and give them to the engineering team. And what happened? In order to fulfill all these requirements, it would take a really long time. And then the organization would be asking, okay, when's it going to be ready? And we'll be like, I don't know, we're working on it, right? The other thing that happened when you have this long list of requirements is it results in a lot of complexity. It results in technical complexity, resulting in technical debt, as well as something I like to call design debt, a lot of complexity as well in the user experience. I love this comic from Dilbert. He says, your user requirements include 400 features. Do you realize that no human would be able to use a product with that level of complexity? Good point. I better add easy to use to the list. And what's happened that by the time we actually built and delivered this feature to the customer, of course, the company, the business, and the customer were already asking for the next thing. So fast forward 3 years later, I'm about to show you the last set of goals that we had for our Q1 OKRs. And this was very cool, actually. I think it was Ezekiel earlier who said, okay, what is the goal of having a high-performance team? It's so I can go on holiday. And I was really lucky. So before I left, we defined these key results together as a team for a broader objective about maintenance and making small improvements in Q1. We wanted to, for technical debt, upgrade at least 3 out of 8 major dependencies. Actually, we did 7. We wanted to launch a feature that we had been working on in the previous quarter. We wanted to make small UX improvements from the previous features as well. And we wanted to build the team. So what happened? I actually took a sabbatical in Q1. I went to Central America and I went to, I think, 5 countries in 7 weeks. So to Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, Costa Rica, and Panama. And when I came back, this is what happened. Check, 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 and check. That was awesome, right? So how is this possible? Well, it didn't happen overnight. And it's also something it's not done, right? The process of team development, organizational development, like software development, is something that's constantly evolving. But what I want to share with you today is basically the different transitions the team at Swipe Guide has gone through from the very beginning when we were larger to when we were smaller and some people left to when we had to rebuild the team. And actually, this last picture is from us in Barcelona when we did our hackathon a few weeks ago. One caveat, though, unlike, for example, Jose earlier, who talked about building high performance and culture in larger organizations, my experience has been with small teams. So I like working with teams that I think in the startup realm, they say you can feed with 2 pizzas, or in Valencia, as I like to say, that you can feed with 2 paellas. So, well, then without further ado, let's get started. So top lessons, lesson number 1. For me, it was about getting the organization right. So I heard the other day from someone working in tech like, oh, you're sleeping with the enemy, the product manager, right? So I think that for me, because I have a background in both product and tech, I see these as actually 2 parts of the same coin. But when we started out, this is what I saw. We had a CPO who had an organization of product managers and UX designers with the goal, of course, to deliver features and value to the customer as quickly as possible. I stepped into this role as the CTO in an engineering organization made up of technical people, engineers, DevOps, and QA, with the goal of improving the technical quality. Makes sense. But why doesn't this work? First of all, you have a misalignment in structure. Often, also as someone said before, 2 different teams working in silos, sometimes overlapping but not always communicating with each other and in 2 different work streams. This results in misalignment in goals. So as you've seen, the product team has product goals, the technical team has technical goals, and in a small company, in a small startup, there's not enough people to actually complete all those goals. And the worst part is the misalignment in requirements. So one team, the product team, comes up with this list of requirements, throws it over to the engineering team, and what happens? Of course, you don't end up building what you mean to build. This is quite a classic internet meme that I'm sure you guys have seen. What the product person understood is the customer wanted a bench. It was probably over-engineered to have 3 different levels of this wooden bench. And then all the different departments start working on it independently. And in the end, what the customer wanted was a swing tire. So what does our organization look like now? After different iterations, we have actually decided to combine everything as a single product circle, maybe which is a bit weird to some of you, coming maybe from a purely technical background. We actually put the product owner with the UX designers, the QA, the engineers, and the DevOps engineers actually all together. And we are supported and have very close contact with our customer support team, which provides us insights from the customers and feedback, and the data and analytics teams, which provides us usage and analytics data so that we can make better decisions as a product team. You see that actually the goals that we have are shared. It is equally as important to increase the user effort score and to ensure ease of use in the platform as it is to have a secure, stable platform. For me, a product without good technology is not a very good product. And having great technology without a use case to fit it, I think also doesn't have that much value either. So for us, why did this work? We had finally alignment and structure, everyone working together towards the same goals. And also, this allowed us to have alignment in requirements. We start early together defining what the solution is. So by the time we actually ship it, actually everyone has the same understanding. And then eventually you reach product technology and hopefully business zen. So, step 2. Now you've got the right organization, it's time to get the right people on board. And this is especially important because I believe that you need to be able to give people problems and not solutions. But you need to be able to have the people with the entire set of skill sets, competencies, and values in order to get that done. So, what did we learn at Swipe Guide before? Who did we look for? Makes sense. We look for front end developers, back end developers, mobile app developers, and data engineers. But what was the problem with this? Even though we found people for the tech stack, what ended up happening is that work needed to be assigned to someone. So the front-end developer picks up the front-end task, the back-end developer picks up the back-end task. But what happens when the front-end developer is done? What's that person going to do? Okay, so he starts picking up more tasks that are related to front-end from the backlog. This creates more work to finish for the entire team. So slowly we started to realize that maybe we should not interview for specific technologies, but actually to look at generalists who have a better understanding of technology overall. So we changed our hiring recruiting strategy. Who do we look for now? We look for full stack developers. But not only that, in order to make this agile organization work, we look for T-shaped profiles. That means someone that has a very a broad range of experience, but also has some area of depth. This can look like a backend engineer, for example, that has maybe 10 years working in Node, but also dabbles a bit on the front end and has some understanding of data engineering. Or it's maybe a very good front end engineer that understands how the backend and the database works. We look for problem solvers. One of the things that we actually do in our interviews is an algorithm exercise. And the problem is not to trick anyone with levels of complexity and n versus 0. That we're not trying to trick you. What we're trying to understand is how do you break down a problem? Can you ask a question to understand the problem so that it makes sense to you? And how do you work with someone else to get to the solution? We look for strong communication skills as well. So can you make a proposal? If you're discussing a code review and you have a different opinion, how do you present your argument about it? And finally, the fit with our culture and values. I mean, basically, we're looking for unicorns, right? So, and I have to tell you that it takes a long time, but we have found them. And I think it is well worth it because with the several unicorns that we've worked with, I think one of them might be in the audience today, they've added so much value to the organization that we have transformed a lot of our practices, I think, for the better. A final thing is that the company values and the fit is very important for us as well. We have 6 of them. I'm going to show them to you, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail for some of them I think that are especially important. Make users awesome, spare resources for better use, go positive. This one I think is really important, always be learning in an organization. And I think this shows in the results that we have. We have members who started off as a QA and actually learned to be a developer after 2 years. And this adds a lot of value to the organization, to the team, because this person now has the perspective from the QA to find all the edge cases while they are developing. We have DevOps engineers that have also learned to code on the back end as well. So whether that's becoming more T-shaped, more broad or deeper, we really encourage people to continue to learn in their role and to take on new challenges. Leave your ego at the door, I think, is also a really important one for us. I love to work with people that are smarter than me. But we have this thing where, I feel like people are so humble in the team. There's never any dumb questions. Everyone is there to help each other. And that's also really important for creating that positive culture in the team and safety as well, psychological safety. And finally, own it. So we're a startup, and this is a place I think that is great for people that thrive with a lot of autonomy, that can take responsibilities and that can shape their own role. I think when you're thinking about when you're looking for a role in a startup or a big company, we can't compete on resources sometimes as a startup. Sometimes it feels like David versus Goliath. But what we can compete on are these values and these ways of working, as well as the understanding of everyone's work life balance, the flexibility. To be able to compete with the larger companies. And that's also something that we look for. Making sure we have the right people on board in the organization for the long term. All right, so now we got the organization, you got the right people. Now let's start building some software. So for that, the right process also is very important. So what did we have before? And I'm not demonizing this because I think in some cases waterfall development can work. For example, if we have a very specific project, a very specific MVP that you really cannot break up, a set of features that have to go out, for example, early in the market. But you shouldn't be doing this, I think, for everything. And so we've gone through waterfall development. We've gone through Kanban as well. And one of the things I think that we started doing with Kanban is to make the work visible, to limit work in progress, and to prioritize things one at a time. So of course, we're making steps towards agility in the last few years, but this still wasn't perfect. And why was that? A lot of times, and I don't know if you guys have experienced as a Kanban, but things kind of get stuck in like ready to review, like 8 things and ready to review, or 8 things that you're trying to test. And a lot of things are still in progress. You're trying to limit work in progress. But in the end, you have things kind of pile up. This leads to large feature branches, for example. This leads to potential risk in deployment with large changes. And we decided to actually keep this as long as we could to not have the overhead that you do with Scrum and a lot of the Scrum ceremonies. We were having weekly plannings, weekly alignments, but at some point we decided, okay, it is time to go to full Scrum. And we've been doing Scrum now for about 30 sprints. I'm going to highlight some of the things that actually we do. I'm sure all of you are also working in sprints already in Scrum, but I think there's a couple of things for us that really helped in the agility. So the first thing was we did Scrum by the book. And that was something that we also debated with in the beginning. Do we start applying parts of Scrum at a time? But we actually ended up going full Scrum, so to speak. We had the refinement meeting, the planning meeting, the demo, and the retro. One of the things I think that's very important in the refinement and in the creation of user stories is maybe you have heard of the acronym INVEST, INVEST. Where I stands for stories that are independent, N for negotiable. And this is important because we actually have all skill sets in a cross-functional refinement so that we can negotiate on those requirements. V for valuable, E for estimatable, S for small, we break things up into smaller pieces, and T for testable. And don't worry, there's going to be a quiz after all of this, so remember that. And of course, then we went into the planning meeting. We have the dailies, and we have, of course, the retrospectives and the demos. I'm sure this is nothing surprising to any of you, but I think what really made this work is when, as a team, we started to measure it. So I want to show you some of the goals that we have come up with as a team. They are just as much some combination of DORA metrics based on also a set of engineering pillars, but also product goals. And the cool thing about this is I don't measure this, the team does. So every month they reflect on their own metrics based on these goals. For example, one of the things that we wanted to solve was to be able to answer the question, well, when will this be done? Right? And so we made the goal sprint predictability, and we actually measured for every sprint what is the percent of the sprint that was completed, as well as the total work, as well as other goals that I'm sure are pretty standard here, including continuous integration and delivery, stability, maintainability. And what was the result of actually all of these changes? Is the ability to actually learn after every sprint. I think that's the biggest thing, being able to make things small enough that you can get feedback after the end of the sprint so that you can either reprioritize something that you're working on, start doing something new, stop doing something, or figure out what it was in the previous sprint that made you effective to continue doing. And this resulted in many cycles of continuous improvement and learning through the retros, rather than building up everything until the end of the quarter to be able to deliver something of value. And the final lesson is to keep iterating. So these things may not work for you. I think we have to figure out what is working depending on the type of situation, depending on the type of team, depending on the type of goals. And even till today, we are still constantly iterating on it because people often come and go also in an organization. So I hope, well, these are just some of the lessons I think that we learned. And I hope that this sheds some light to help happier and more productive software development teams somewhere in the world. So thank you so much, and please let me know if you have any questions.